Hey everybody, and welcome to today's video lecture. This video lecture will focus on analyzing your audience. As usual, let's get started with a question. What happens if you fail to analyze your audience? This is what happens. Your presentation misses the mark. No matter how well structured, no matter how well delivered, your presentation will miss the mark if you fail to analyze your audience. So to avoid this, let's discuss 8 tips for analyzing your audience. Tip 1, present to everyone in the room, even when your core audience is limited. Imagine that you're trying to persuade 3 decision makers. Should you speak to those 3 key decision makers only? No, of course not. You should speak to everyone in the room for your presentation. By doing so, you can take advantage of what is called persuasive contagion. Persuasive contagion is based on the idea that after a presentation, people get together, they talk, they compare notes, and if you can impress half of the people in the room, then those people, in the course of their conversations with their colleagues and other audience members, will reflect positively upon your performance and enhance the persuasive power of your presentation. That is persuasive contagion. Tip 2, use LinkedIn, web search results, and other resources to research your audience. Those resources are out there. Take advantage of them to understand who your audience members are and what they care about. Tip 3, identify how audience members potentially benefit from your presentation. No matter how well crafted or delivered your presentation is, if your audience doesn't see how they'll benefit from your proposal, they will not be persuaded. So make sure that you emphasize audience benefits in your presentation. Tip 4, consider how much your audience already knows about your topic. There are a few better ways to bore an audience than to provide a bunch of background information that they already possess. Conversely, there are a few better ways to confuse an audience than to dive into a topic without providing adequate background. So make sure you assess your audience's knowledge level going into your presentation. Tip 5, find common ground with your audience and build goodwill. Even if your audience already likes you, make sure that you emphasize things that you have in common. Make sure that you focus on building relationships. Your audience is more likely to be persuaded if they feel that they share common ground with you and if they like you. Don't neglect either of these tasks. Similarly, tip 6 tells us to anticipate audience members' likely reactions to both you and to your topic. If your audience views you favorably, if they view your topic favorably, yes, you should still focus on developing common ground, on building goodwill, but you can nevertheless be a bit more direct in your presentation. But if your audience members don't view you with credibility, or if they're unfavorable to your topic or proposal going into your presentation, then you need to spend more time and more energy developing that common ground and building those relationships. Tip 7, pay attention to differences in cultural norms. Before you go into any presentation, think about the cultural background of your audience and plan your presentation accordingly. If your audience members, or at least many of them, come from a cultural background with what we call a high power differential, if they come from a culture, in other words, that tends to look favorably upon hierarchy, then perhaps making jokes at the expense of authoritative people, authority figures in the institution you're presenting to, is not the best approach. Similarly, if you're presenting to a large group of non-native English speakers, then perhaps including English language puns that rely upon a fluency in English is not your best idea. So keep those cultural factors and norms in mind as you plan and go into your presentation. Tip 8, tailor your approach to your audience size and to your composition. There are plenty of totally valid presentation strategies and techniques that work beautifully with a small group of folks that will not work with a larger group of folks. The same thing applies based on the career level or background of your audience. Something that works well with senior executives may not work with new hires. Along the same lines, adjust your content based on your presentation location and the time of day. If you can, scope out your presentation site. Think about the seating arrangements. Think about the acoustics. Think about the size of the room. Think about the AV setup and plan accordingly. Also, think about how the time of day of your presentation will influence that presentation. The energy level in the morning is very different from the energy level in a room right after lunch or in the evening. So depending upon when you're presenting in a given day, think about how you can modulate your approach or your energy level to best match or counteract that of your audience. And that brings us to the end of our 8 tips on how to effectively analyze an audience. Thanks, as always, for tuning in.